All right. Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to our very first ever virtual seminar on Zoom, which has become the most attractive venue of choice to hold forums and meetings during this pandemic crisis. And this is PPALM's first attempt to conduct a virtual seminar with about, I think we're seeing all these faces. I think we have over 80 attendees. And we hope this be very productive this afternoon or morning on your side of the world. We have attendees from across the country, from Hawaii and Ireland, Germany, and even Brazil. I saw Captain Capistrano, who was linking in from Brazil, which is, if nothing else, this is a good way of exercising global.
Hey, General, how are you?
How you doing? But so if nothing else, this is a good way of exercising global social distancing, right? It's good, and we're witness to that. We have a good program today to be presented by subject matter experts, Dr. Clemson Tarragano, a managing director at the Center for Creative Leadership, and he'll present on leadership on crisis. And Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Chad Kyle, Chief Flight Surgeon at the Pentagon Aerospace Medical Clinic in the Pentagon. I think he's also the Chief Medical Officer for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So before we begin, I have the distinct honor of introducing our distinguished guest. You all have General Shinzeki's bio in the program, but let me highlight his distinguished record of over 40 years in public service. He was born and raised in Kauai, Hawaii, lovely island. He graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1965. And throughout his assignments in the Army and also in joint service, to include combat tours in Vietnam, command of the 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood, Texas, command of the NATO Stabilization Force in Bosnia-Herzegovina in Europe. He rose to the rank of 4-star Army General and Chief of Staff of the United States Army, the first Asian American general in the United States Armed Forces to achieve this distinction. Later, he served as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and with him leading two of this country's largest organizations, came with huge insurmountable missions such as responding to the 9/11 attacks, deploying troops to Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. And later, as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, he responded in developing and delivering accessible healthcare programs to veterans and benefits, a huge undertaking for him and for the Veterans Affairs. So needless to say, General Shinzeki has extensive experience in leading and developing solutions to include providing programs on resiliency to the workforce and families, all laid heavy on his shoulders. So he's gone through the gauntlet of leading in times of crisis. Most notably, he provided the inspiration and motivation for us back 13 years ago to form the Pan-Pacific American Leaders and Mentors. So ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big virtual welcome for General Eric Shinzeki. You want to unmute him?
Yeah.
Okay. Sir, you have to unmute.
Okay, here we go.
I don't think I'm muted myself.
There you go.
There you
You're good. You're good.
Well, Tony, thank you for inviting me to make some brief opening comments today. And thanks for those nice words of introduction. And congratulations to you and Lida for this wonderful, test of technology. It is Memorial Day weekend. And so greetings to all of you on this weekend of Memorial Day. It's a special time for me. I'm grateful to, the men and women with whom I've served and who have served our nation during time of war, including some in my family who served during World War II, and as so many of your families did as well. And so here we are in the midst of a pandemic global crisis. And it's hard not to look back at World War II and remember that was another global crisis, and in which the existence of nations were threatened. And personally, as someone who's been carried back twice out of tight spots on the backs of American soldiers, you can appreciate Memorial Day is pretty special to me. I'm honored to be here with you. And as Tony recapped very briefly, not the first rodeo. I remember being at West Point as a student when the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. And we mobilized active units as well as National Guard and flooded them to Florida, ostensibly to prepare for an invasion to deal with that crisis. And then after that, within about a year, I can still remember the classroom I was sitting in when we received word that John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. And then following that, the assassinations of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and the razing of so many of our large cities as citizens protested these incidents. And then I left to go back to a second tour in Vietnam, and I got back just in time to witness the Kent State shootings in May of 1970. I thought our world was coming to an end. The fabric of our society was being pulled in ways that, as a young officer, I had no idea what to make of all of it. But somehow we came through it. And so on this Memorial Day, lots to remember. You know, it's written in a good book somewhere, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I don't know who the author was, although I in my research, narrowed it down to a person called Erasmus of Rotterdam, a philosopher. Some argue that his quotation is about physical sight. I've never seen it that way. I've always thought of it more about vision, a vision founded in knowledge. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so for those of us who come from operational backgrounds, we always want more intelligence before acting. We never see enough in a burgeoning crisis, so we hesitate, we wait for near total situational clarity before deciding to act. And sometimes our deliberateness allows us to miss some opportunities. Of course, we never get to see it all, no matter how long we wait. And the one-eyed man is king, because while he doesn't see it all, he sees enough to be decisive. More than anyone else. And so we strive to be one-eyed kings. When do you know enough to be decisive in your actions? You will spend the rest of your professional lives trying to answer that question. The most powerful words in your vocabulary are the ones that come before the question marks in your sentence. The most powerful words in your vocabulary are the ones that come before the question marks. Don't be afraid to ask questions in your organizations. It tells people that you don't have all the answers, that you need their help to know when to act, that you welcome their considered judgments, that you are interested in earning their trust, building a team, a competent organization. The power of leadership in any organization is more than the power of just one. It is the power of the one big collective brain that you nurture and grow during pre-crisis. You have the luxury of time then to be patient, to be inefficient, to stumble around a bit, to find your organizational footing, that stance that you will carry into the future crisis. Once the crisis presents itself, the urgency of time changes your leadership style. It must. Where you could be more collegial during pre-crisis, you now find yourself being more directive. Two attributes that I always appreciated in strong leaders that I worked for, and that they, for the most part, had in common. And those two attributes were situational awareness and adaptiveness. Situational awareness, because they could step back from their responsibilities and see themselves inside their leadership predicament, inside those challenges, seeing not just the set of problems immediately confronting them, but saw themselves as their subordinates perceive them. And as you become more senior in your responsibilities, the number of those audiences observing you multiply. And so situational awareness takes on greater complexity. After 9/11, I met with the Army staff, with families of the fallen who perished in the Pentagon, with families of the missing, some of whom we never recovered, with the injured in a variety of hospitals in Washington, D.C., moving to console. And then subordinate commanders who were standing by for instructions. What are we going to do, boss? Eventually, members of Congress and other external audiences. All of these audiences have expectations, and you have a role to play with each of them. The second attribute, adaptiveness, the agility to adjust behaviors, your behaviors as leader, to meet the expectations.
Sir, you're not coming through. Vida? Sir, we lost you.
I think we lost him. Yeah.
We have a,
Yeah, he's gone. He'll have to come back in.
have to come back in.
Yeah.
Let's wait a few minutes so he
he's
can
back.
complete his thought.
Okay.
There he is.
There he
Okay.
is.
Sorry, we lost you for a bit there.
Do I need to go back and repeat anything?
Sir, go back to your last sentence.
Okay. Let me pick up here. The power of leadership in any organization is indispensable. That quality that only you can provide, especially in our current situation. And uncertainty is great. People are afraid, and folks are getting hurt. But the power of leadership is more than the power of just one. Senior leaders are responsible to spend every available moment during pre-crisis, ensuring that there are no single point failures in their organization. Hesitancy, inadequate mastery of essential skills and knowledge, the fractured relationships, however slight, that plague every organization. None of those get stronger when you apply the overpressures of crisis or battle. And so you have to deal with it in pre-crisis, peacetime, if you will. In organizations with in extremis missions, as Brigadier General Tom Colditz refers to those kinds of missions, these flaws could break a unit. Leadership's responsibility is to devote the pre-crisis to training the standard, to developing competence and confidence, to growing trust, and bolstering those hairline fractures. They exist in every organization. Seek them out while there's time to strengthen trust and teamwork. It takes time to do this well, time to be collegial and patient, And when crisis strikes, the urgency of time will force an adjustment to your leadership style to being more directive. It will drive your rhythms, so expect it. Invest your pre-crisis time wisely. Train your organizations, strengthen its relationships, grow your people intellectually. And at this point, I'd offer a couple of reads whenever the time allows you to read additional materials. One book called The Great Game by Peter Hopkirk, and the other, The World, A Brief Introduction by Richard Haass, currently serving president of the Council on Foreign Relations. Worthy primers that remind us that culture and history are important to all of us, especially during crises. One-eyed kings and queens build competent organizations. Those are one big collective brains which outperform everyone else in a crisis. Good luck to all of you. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Once again, Tony, thanks for including me. Have a great seminar. And a shout out to some of the people I understand are on the net this morning. Major General Susie Lum, Brigadier General retired Jim Harai, Dr. Molly Kahara. All of you have the luxury of sitting in Hawaii this morning. And so the rest of us envy you. And to Lieutenant Colonel Promotable Khan Diep, who was an Army fellow with us at the VA for a period of my life. Have a great Memorial weekend, everybody. Tony, thanks a lot. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Aloha.
Okay, wonderful words of wisdom. You could only imagine Fitz was going through a lot of these dilemmas that he described, especially after 9/11. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Khan, Lieutenant Colonel Khan, to make brief introductions on our speakers. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Well, it's difficult to follow such a great speech and introduction by General Shinseki. So, sir, thank you so much for doing that. At this time, we have a program scheduled with Dr. Targano's presentation, followed by Dr. Cowles. So, without further ado, we'll turn it back over to you, sir, for a brief introduction of Dr. Targano's.
Okay.
Over to you.
Good. Well, you know, we just on the personal side, because Clemson and I, Dr. Tornagano and I served together at Fort Hood a long time ago, and you know, with ad nauseum on his bio. I mean, he's got a very distinctive biography, and he was also was involved in a huge crisis when he commanded his tank battalion during Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq. So you could imagine it's not just a small crisis, because I would imagine that the crisis is that he's trying to protect his troops and as well as the families at home. We served together. He was my operations officer when I was a brigade commander at Fort Hood. Didn't know that he was a PhD at that time. He just came in and said, "Hey, sir, I'm here." And then I learned later that he actually had a doctorate. That's the reason why I didn't understand what he said for the longest time, because he was talking in PhD speak up here, and I'm down on the dirt trying to understand what the heck was he talking about. But again, I asked him to come and do a presentation for us. He is the managing director for the Center for Creative Leadership, which is a global organization that provides just about anything you want to know on leadership. And he has presented across the world, whether it's in South America, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Singapore, and the like. So he's seen it all. And I consider him a subject matter expert on what he is going to present. So please have a virtual welcome for Dr. Clemson Torregano.
Thank you very much, sir. I certainly appreciate the introduction, and it's great to be back on the Warhorse Net again. It's wonderful to be with PPALM, and I consider it a true privilege to speak with you today, but just an honor to be in your company today. And General Shinseki, General Taguba, General Lom, General Harai, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. And for my Coastie colleague down in Brasilia, Bom dia, and thank you very much for joining us. And Lita, real quick time check. How much time do I have, and when would you like me to wrap things up and hand things over to Colonel Call?
You're good. Do your thing. We're good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you should all be seeing a screen right now that says today's topic is leading through crisis. Is that correct? Does everybody see that screen? There we go. Awesome.
Yes.
Because we're going to do a couple of things today. Today we're experimenting with a lot of different technologies, and we're going to be using some technologies to find out how you're thinking about crisis. One of the imposing factors about our conversation today is that every person on this call has led through crisis. Every person on this call is in some form of organizational crisis as we speak. And that's why I appreciate General Shinseki's words so much, because the leader who's adaptable is the one who is able to step up into the balcony, to step back and slow down to speed up. And that's what we're going to do today, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about, you're going to look at this and go, okay, you know, I kind of knew that, but how are you applying it today? What's happening in your world today? And how can you set the conditions for strategic success even during the crisis? When you're doing those things, when you're showing that adaptability that General Shinseki talks about, when we're stepping back and reflecting and taking the time to do that, then we are really exercising not only leadership, but strategic leadership. So I'm going to ask you to do some of that right now. And I'm going to ask you to use another piece of technology. I know this sounds very strange, but I'm from the Center for Creative Leadership, and we do things a little differently. I'd like you to take out your phone, and if you would, go to your browser on your smartphone and type in polev.com/leading2020. This is the first of 7 polls that we'll be doing to collect information about this group and help focus our conversation to what is really needed now. So again, if you'll go to polev.com/leading2020, and I'll go there as well, you'll see a question there, and it says, please provide one word that describes how you feel about the current COVID-19 crisis. This person typed in already, confused. I'm really confused. Anxious. Thank you. We've got some words coming in now. And also anxious. Hopeful. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Hit the wrong thing. There we go. I'm going into my chat, and I'll put some information on chat for you. Uneasy. There we go. Focused. Yeah, it's really interesting that what happens in crisis, as all of us are aware, we become extremely focused. So this type of opportunity to reflect becomes even more important. Uncertain. We're going to talk a lot about certainty and clarification and the role that leaders play in crisis, because can we ever be certain? Bob Johansson of the Institute for the Study of the Future in San Francisco, one of our partners, and one of the real thought leaders about crisis management, talks about the real leaders of the future will be less about certainty and more about clarity. And going back to something that General Shinseki shared with us, is those leaders who can provide clarity for their organizations. Yeah, you know, that's the one-eyed man, because they can help their organization see what's going to happen. We're going to talk about how to do that as we walk through our presentation. Yeah, we've got challenging, uneasy, time to reset. Boy, is that powerful. And I hope we keep that in the back of our mind as we walk through our conversation today. As the world changes around us, we have a number of decisions that we get to make. And we're going to talk about how we make those decisions to either reset, continue what we were doing, build emergent strategies, or basically build something entirely new. Helpless. Yeah, it's real easy to feel helpless in a crisis of this nature. It is so large. I had the privilege of working with an executive team in Manila last week, and we were talking about how this pandemic affects every business, every country around the globe. And with that type of breadth, it's easy to feel helpless. So what can we do as leaders? What can we do as leaders to combat that helplessness and provide clarity, provide a framework perhaps to help people understand the VUCA nature, the volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous world that we live in a way that they can begin operating? Because one of the things we're going to talk about in a moment is when we talk about crisis, we're actually in two. One crisis is the one that we're faced with, and that's the organizational crisis that might have been placed on us by the pandemic. The other crisis, and one that especially some of us as really strong leaders are really tough to accept, we are all in personal crisis. Our world has ended. Our world that was so clear to us just 3 months ago has basically come to an end. So that places us in crisis as well. Understanding our concerns, which is why I asked you to share your thoughts with me today, understanding our concerns is actually the foundation of the neuroscience of making decisions of leading through crisis. Because as we understand ourselves, then we understand the framework within which we are making decisions. So thank you for doing this. We will consolidate all of these answers. I'll provide these to Lita, and she'll be able to distribute the answers to the polls that we're going over today. So let's talk a little bit about the Center for Creative Leadership. Real quick, the Center for Creative Leadership is a 501c3 nonprofit started in Greensboro, North Carolina, and we have been going for over 50 years. And our focus is leadership. We're going to talk a little bit about management, but it's primarily the role that leaders play in leading from the inside out, starting from where you are, understanding yourself, understanding your impact on others. We work with Fortune 100 companies around the world. We work with organizations around the world, and we have offices on all the continents. The key thing that the center does is we are a think tank with a delivery arm. So we have a great deal of expertise about leadership in specific areas. We've all been through crisis. Well, what CCL does is during and after the crisis, we gather people together and talk about what are the leadership lessons learned from that crisis. And we started that actually with the Challenger disaster. Then, of course, 9/11, Katrina, basically a number of, we did some work actually in Moscow after Chechnya. We've done work in Kenya and Central Africa. And now we're looking at the COVID crisis. And you're going to see that we're soon going to talk about these as a level 3 crises. So what we want to do is we want to put some of that research to work. And so we're going to talk about a 7-step framework in a way that you can structure some of this ambiguity and better understand what's going on around you so you can make decisions. Then we're going to talk about the framework itself. We're going to be doing application all the way through. So we will be taking more polls. I'm going to ask you to participate in chat. We're going to be raising hands. We're going to use some annotation. So you're really going to be familiar with Zoom by the time we're finished today. I'm going to make one quick, there we go. All right, I'd make one quick adjustment there. Perfect. And then we'll have some time for some more Q&A when we're finished. Also, I put a note in chat. If you have questions or anything else, please put them into chat, and I'll try to get them as we're walking through our conversation. If I don't have a chance to answer your question, then we will get an answer to you following our discussion today. So let's talk a little bit about, first, exactly what General Shinseki said. And I can't thank General Shinseki enough. He's setting me up for success, because our first objective is we're talking about situational awareness. How do we walk to the balcony, not be a part of the dance on the floor, but observe what's going on in the dance? We'll talk a little bit about situational awareness. We're going to talk about the importance of agility and resilience in crisis. I'm going to spend a lot of time on agility, and I'm going to ask Colonel Cowell to talk more about resilience. He's got some terrific ideas about individual resilience, and I'm just going to hit on that piece. Then we're going to talk about the 7 steps to address that crisis. And when we talk about this 7 steps, what we're talking about is a framework. This is not prescriptive, it is descriptive. So what we want to do is offer a slice in time understanding of 7 things that you can do to better make sense of any crisis you're in, not just COVID, but the other crises that hit us all the time. And what I'd ask you to think about is that as I'm going to talk about organizations, think about yourself and go, where am I personally in this crisis? How can I look at this helplessness and become more helpful? What is my role in this? Because that's where we're going to create the new mindset. And that's really what the 7 steps are all about, is creating a new mindset to use through a crisis. One of the things that everybody on this call is really, really good at is we can fix a problem. We can adjust to a crisis, and we can make whatever happen. But we're looking at the crisis. What we want to do in our framework today is look through a crisis, and look through a crisis to a way to set a foundation for better strategic success after the crisis. That's the new mindset that we're talking about. And so as we talk about leading through crisis, we talk about 3 stages of crisis: assess, act, and evolve, and 7 steps in the crisis. And the 7 steps in the crisis, the first is orient and sense making. And when we look at orient, we're looking at what is happening. That's the question we want to answer for ourselves and for others. What's happening? Because people are in shock, as we're all aware. We are starting a change curve. And as you know about change curves, they all start down. So I've got anxiety. I want to deny. So we have to make sense of it. What does it mean? There's a sense of confusion in our people. There's doubt, and there's resistance. This really isn't happening. I'm going to go out and do whatever I want because it's not going to happen to me. And that sense of resistance can be very powerful. So once we've assessed where we are, we've got to start acting. And we use some terms here in our next 3 steps that you're familiar with: triage, strategize, and execute. When we're talking about triage, what's most urgent now? As you know, in all triage, we've got to stop the bleeding. We've got to set the conditions for surviving right now. And we got to start creating some clarity. Got to understand grief. Strategize. What's the impact on our strategy and daily operations? That's where we start exploring. Okay, we've stopped the bleeding. This person, we're going to live through this. What's coming next? What are we doing now? How are we going to do it? And we got to execute. And this is going to be some fun stuff when we talk about this, because when we execute, execution is not just the execution of the organization. It's a balance between the people and the organization. And it's not an either or. One of my favorite things to do in my beginning leaders classes, I always ask the leaders, I said, what's more important, leadership or management? And everybody realizes that you must have both. And in crisis, that management and all the preconditions that General Shinseki mentioned become even more critical. So once we've executed, for those of us who are currently in the military or have been in the military a while, you know what happens next. Events like this. This is what shows that you're dynamic leaders, because you're taking this time to reflect, you're taking this time to recalibrate, and then we pivot for the future. That's where we've set the foundation. We know what's happening. We have triage, we're ready to go. That's where the redirection happens. And that's where the strategic leadership really comes into play. And that's our evolve stage. So we have 7 steps: orient, sense make, triage, strategize, execute, recalibrate, and pivot. And again, just want to reinforce, this is a framework. These are not prescriptive steps. They're descriptive because you're doing all these at the same time. You know it. All this is a slice in time to better help us gain an understanding of what we need to be thinking about while in crisis. So here's a question for you. If you open up your phone and you go back to poll everywhere, the question is, what step are you currently in? And that can be you or your organization. What step are you currently in? Orient, sense make, triage, strategize, execute, recalibrate, pivot. We're going to watch some results coming in here. Yep. This is terrific. Oh, I love that. The strong, we got a horse race with recalibrate here. This is terrific. It's really exciting. I spent some time on Thursday with the senior leadership team of a state university in the Midwest. And this conversation that we were having was a part of their recalibration. They had to decide whether or not they're going to have students come back in the fall. They had to decide what was happening in the summer. But they wanted to recalibrate and think differently about the crisis. And that's what recalibration did for them. Some sense making is still going on. Triage is still going on. Absolutely. And we've got a few more answers coming in. So we're seeing when we do this presentation or when we have these classes around the world, that a lot of organizations right now are exactly where you are: triage and strategize. Some are starting to execute because they're moving into a different phase within the COVID crisis. But as we look at triage and strategize, we'll spend a lot of time there. We'll also spend some time in recalibrate as well. Please don't forget to put your questions into chat if you have any questions as we go through. Excellent. Yep, we got some more strategize coming in. There we go. And the interesting thing is, like in this framework, all of these steps are important, and where you are depends on your context. And let's talk about what that might mean. When we start looking at the 7 steps, the first thing we want to do is orient. And what's interesting is we're used to, it's a fire. I got to orient on the fire. Well, yeah, it's a fire. But when it's a pandemic as large as this one, this is where General Shinseki is absolutely right on. And that is, what are you all about? That's where your values, your mission, and your goals become so important. And also, you'll need to frame the crisis. We'll talk about framing the crisis and creating clarity in just a moment. The other thing that you want to do when you orient is immediately identify that crisis response team and give them some space to make those decisions that focus on 3 key things: direction, alignment, and commitment. At Center for Creative Leadership, we don't have a definition for leadership, but we do have a framework. And our framework is that leadership, being a leader is being a manager, having that role. Leadership is a social process that creates an environment of shared direction, alignment, and commitment. So you can be a leader, but you may not have a leadership environment. So we want to create that DAC for in the short run first, then for the good of everybody, and then that commitment piece, which is so strong, which really gives you the fuel to get through the crisis. Yeah, that's where the values and the shared necessity of the situation come into play. And there's 2 key qualities that leaders have to pay attention to: agility. And it's interesting because we can take General Shinseki's definition of adaptability and drop it into agility, and we are there, okay? That's where you have the ability to step back and look and make decisions. And then individual and organizational resiliency. And like I said, we're not going to talk a lot about resiliency because I think Colonel Cowell has some really terrific stuff we're going to talk more about, but we are going to discuss a lot about individual agility. One of the first things we want to do after we've formed our small team and we are orienting through the crisis is how do you frame the crisis for others? How do we create that clarity? And one of the ways to do that is with metaphors. Metaphors are just so powerful. I mean, General Shinseki mentioned World War II. We've had people talk about nurses as frontline soldiers. We've had a corona vaccine as bullets against the virus. That's the power of metaphors. They imply a specific logic. They allow for quick alignment because, oh, wow, that makes sense. A shot is like a bullet against a, okay, I know what that is. It indicates roles and relationships, but you know, it's interesting because in a very unique way, it defines values, all right? Because frontline people are people who are giving it all. They have a sense of urgency. They are in a place where they may or may not have a lot of decisions to make about being there, but they have a lot of decisions to make once they are there. And then it also helps us with what success is. If we define this as a war, success is winning. Success is beating the enemy. So I'm curious about what metaphors you or your organization might be using. And if you'd put those metaphors that you're hearing, just go ahead and put them into chat and we can share them with everybody as we go through the chat function. We've heard journey, we've heard global opportunity. What are some metaphors that you're using and that you have heard that? And I just got a request. Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer you that. We do have the 2 slides that you received and unprecedented challenge. Oh, yeah. I love unprecedented because it means, you know what? There is no box. You need to think. You can't think out of the box when there's no box. So let's think really creatively about this. Unprecedented challenge is a very powerful one. If you look up Michigan State University's website and you look at their response to COVID, I love they had all of their metaphors on one slide, and it was keep learning, keep researching, keep going, because Spartans never stop. What a great metaphor, ties it back into their values, very powerful. And when we had a number of conversations with them, everyone across the university was adapting that perspective. Shared alignment. So we're creating some clarity for our, there we go, much better, there we are. So we're creating clarity for everybody inside our organization. And now that we've got some clarity, how do we meet complexity? This is some work that was done by Dr. Kevin O'Gorman at the University of California, San Diego. He's now a member of our faculty. And he started talking about how do we address complex situations? Because a normal, you know, if it's a simple situation in terms of environment, we can have a simple mindset and one person can address that. When we go into a very complex environment, but you only have a simple perspective or a simple mindset, and it may be outside of that person's cognitive structure, you have absolute chaos. And we've all seen this with people we've worked with where they walk in, their eyes are real wide and they go, I don't know what to do. And that's why they're coming to you, because they need more complexity. They need a better mindset. They need to have better interaction because their environment just reached a level of complexity that was beyond their scope of understanding. It may have been an unprecedented challenge. But when you have a super complex situation like our pandemic, you have to have a complex mindset and interaction. And that's where you build collective intelligence. That's where, as General Shinseki was saying, we bring those people together that may be smarter than we are to provide that insight. And we meet complexity with complexity. When you have collective sense-making, and Kevin is real funny about this, he uses this a lot, you have to have all the adults in the room. And the adults in the room are those who understand each other, work together, and basically hierarchy is important, but it's not critical. You want to have a flat and organization to share information and receive feedback. And it's interesting that, so what's the role of the leader in collective intelligence? when I was in Afghanistan, I was working in strategic planning. We had there was a significant earthquake in North Pakistan. We were being called to provide resources. We went running into our boss and said, you know, what are we going to do? And boss, smart guy, like everyone on this call, he sat down and he looked at his 3 planners and he said, I don't know, what are you going to do? What are we going to do? Why don't we sit down and have a conversation? He said, sit down. He said, get a sheet of paper, put it on the table, and let's figure out what our options are. Let's go through this. We actually went through the equivalent of the 7 steps. And then his role was to be an enabler and guide that conversation. Very strong interaction, and you could feel the interdependence and the alignment that came out of that discussion. That's where we're talking about meeting complexity with complexity. Getting the right people who understand the complexity of the situation so that we can come up with the right answers to meet that complexity. So I got a question for you about your team. And it's about, how is your team meeting the complexity of this crisis? Is it the smartest one in the room is the leader? The smartest ones in the room are experienced experts? Hey, smartest one in the room is the room. Is the smartest one in the room the room? Or we have a bunch of people running around fighting fires left and right. So if you go to PPALM.com/leading2020, go ahead and take this real quick. Let's see where this group is. And instead of others, I had to put another one in there, which we find happens in crises. And there's a lot of praying and hoping for the best. You know, that's always an option. And we'll start seeing some, there we go. Yep, we're starting to see some answers in here. Smartest person in the room. Yeah, it's interesting that I've done a number of government audiences as we've talked about the frameworks. And I'd like to say that one of the differences between the government audiences and some of our business audiences is there is always a higher percentage of smartest ones in the room as a room. One of the reasons is that if you, as we all have gone through any type of basic training or anything like that, we're trained to work in teams. Some of my friends in business are not, and they have been trained that their success is as an individual. And so they'll say that the smartest person in the room is the leader, which is fine. The question is, what does the leader do in the room? Is the leader being prescriptive or descriptive? Is that leader telling everybody what to do or listening to ideas and providing resources for those ideas' success? We also work with some cultures who are very dependent on experts being in the room, and that's okay. You know, love it when experts come and have the chance to talk with everybody. It's great to be with you here today. But you know what? I don't have the skin in the game that you might have. And so experts in the room are helpful in providing what we're doing today, and that's frameworks and ideas. And it goes back to the room needs to be smart, enable those resources, and meet the needs of that crisis. So yeah, the smartest ones in the room need to be the room. And as leaders, we want to make sure that we create the environment for that to happen. That's all orienting. Now we need to make sense out of it. And as we make sense out of it, Dr. Gene Klon, who is a retired 06 Colonel infantryman, is also on our faculty, and he did our primary research following the Katrina disaster. And it was fascinating what he found out, because he discovered that there are 3 levels of disaster. And when we're making sense, we want to figure out what crisis we're in. We have known problems that have known solutions. And this is your everyday, if there's a legal problem, you send it to JAG or you send it to legal and you take care of the legal problem. You have known problems with unknown solutions. This might be one of the great case studies out there. It's a Tylenol case where Tylenol was, had been poisoned by someone, and they had to make some very out of the box decisions. And then you have level 3, and that's complex problems with unknown solutions. And that's where lives are lost, businesses are disrupted, global pandemics affecting every aspect of business. And most people will say that the situation we're in right now is a level 3. And as we are moving through the crisis, it is becoming more of a level 2, because we know what the challenges are. All right. What we don't know is what's happening around those challenges or what our response might be. So the first part about sense making is know what type of crisis you're in. The second part of sense making comes from externally. Talking to customers, colleagues, network, and experts, people like yourselves finding out what's going on in the world, doing some comparative analysis. This is what we think about the crisis. What are our workers saying the crisis is? That's always an interesting conversation, as we are all aware, especially senior leaders, where we understand what the crisis is at our level. What is the crisis at their level? And then we need to assess something that we're familiar with. We need to assess the threat level versus time. But the interesting thing is our threat level is kind of time itself. And you're probably familiar with this 2x2 matrix. Some people call this the Eisenhower matrix because he did this every day. And what he did is he analyzed the urgent now against the important soon. So on the vertical axis, you have urgent to important. And on the horizontal axis, you have things you have to do now and things you have to do soon. We're going to continue working with this 4-quadrant graphic as we go through this. So I'm really curious about what sense-making activity you have done that has helped the most. Some sense-making activities are skip level meetings where I went down and talked to my workers. I walked the floor, did those things that General Shinseki said. I made sure I was visible and talked to people. What have you seen happening? And you can do this 2 ways. One is you can go into chat and just put your ideas into chat so we can share some ideas across the group. The other thing is, if you look at the top of your Zoom box, there is an annotate function. And you can go up there and hit text. You can hit text. You can find a color. Please don't use white or yellow. And you'll see an icon that comes up and they'll have the font size. Font size 24 usually works. But if you'd like to annotate what sense-making activity you've used. We worked with one faith-based group, and I really appreciated working with them. It was a wonderful perspective on crisis. And I said, we asked them the same question. So what sense-making have you used? And the answer that came back was the New Testament. I said, that's very powerful. I said that because that's something they all had in common. That's something they could all use. It's a sense-making activity. So if you want to go ahead and put sense-making activities that you're familiar with into chat, or go ahead and annotate, that would be very powerful. And also we take questions on chat as well. There we go. I'm going to blow my chat up here a little bit. Okay. Lita, my chat just disappeared. So as these come in, if you have really good ideas, let me know. That happens sometimes. There we go. Simple conversation. Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's premier. I mean, just going down and talking with folks. What's happening where you are? I love this. Getting people, especially younger members of the team, to verbalize their concerns. And that's where we're exercising those principles General Shinseki talked about, and that's where we're asking a lot of questions. How are you doing? And are you getting what you need? Are you getting the resources you need? Virtual meetings like this one, absolutely premier. Virtual town halls. We had an organization that did a virtual town hall and actually had sent everybody that was going to be in the virtual town hall. It was all of their managers, about 300 managers, but sent them all a package and said, don't open the package until told to do so by the CEO. So everybody's very concerned what's in this package. And actually, it's an organization that works on the vaccine for COVID. So it's a medical research organization. And he got up there, he talked about what was happening. He got ideas from them. And he said, you know what? It's time for us to recognize your contribution, everybody's contribution. They opened up their package, and there was some stuff from the CEO, but there was also a hat. There was a party blower. And there was a sign that everybody could use to talk to each other. And they basically had a quick party online with everybody in the same hat, everybody at the same signs. And it was a huge morale booster, but also helped them make sense of where they were in the crisis. Zoom meetings, sharing info from credible sources, absolutely. Boy, I can't stress this one enough. And Lee, I think you're right on. Establish routines and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the importance of communication. So I want to thank you for sharing those sense-making activities. Please keep them coming into chat, and we're going to share those with everybody once we're finished our dialogue today. So now we've made sense. Let's talk a little bit about the takeaways. First, you want to establish your crisis leadership team, prioritize information, make sense of it, filter out what's necessary. Because our next step is acting. That's our next step. And the first part of that is triage, is we got to stop the bleeding. Now we kind of know what's going on. We know where to apply our resources. So you need a triage team with diverse perspectives. And this is where it's interesting that, and I really appreciate the CEO for the Center for Creative Leadership, because he said, in our triage team, I don't want all my managers. You go find the people who are best in crisis and who can act quickly. And those are the people in the triage team, and we're going to listen to them. And that's what we did. So I have the privilege of working for Vice Admiral retired John Ryan, former superintendent of the Naval Academy, terrific leader. And he got a number of skip level people to come in and build that triage team. Very diverse, collective intelligence. And then you have to, after you've identified that triage, start that communication. Start it in a cadence and start it in a way that meets the crisis that people are in. Remember our 4 quadrants. We have triage priorities, but in the other ones, as we start talking about the important soon, we have daily operations, deliberate strategy, and emergent strategy. When we go into triage, what must we do now? Okay. And I'm going to use an example of my friend Pierre of the Monarch Barbecue here in Spartanburg, South Carolina, because he went through every one of these steps and he did it in a very unique way. And I started talking to him. I said, what did you hear about when you did COVID? And he said, well, the first thing we had to do was we had to clean everything. We had to separate the tables. We had to show that we are being as responsive as we could. That was a triage to set the foundation for everything going forward. And what we might want to do in our organization is, who do we need to talk to and what do we need to say? That is a true triage priority. Once we've got that triage team going and we've stopped the bleeding, or we've established a foundation for what we need to do in our organization at Center for Creative Leadership, hey, we are a face-to-face travel in-class organization. All of those things stopped within 2 weeks. So in our triage organization, we realized we had to double down on our online offerings, and we had to build a great deal of live online opportunities. And that's what we focused on. Once you've stopped the bleeding, you're ready to strategize. And this is that area where I saw many people in this call are at right now, is the triage process. This is a tricky thing, because you want another team doing this. You want one team that's doing triage, and then you want another team separate from them that's building out. So you might have, and some people call this tactical and strategy. Some people call it tactical and operations. Some people call it short-term and long-term. But when we start strategizing, we want to expand to a concurrent focus of triage priorities and operations and strategy. And that's where that yellow band comes in. Because going back to my friend Pierre in Monarch Barbecue, he said, look, I've got to change all my daily operations. And then as South Carolina started shutting down, he had to build emergent strategies. He didn't do takeout. He didn't do curbside. And he needed to do both. So he realized he had to retrain his wait staff. He had to retrain all of his cashiers. And that's what he had for emergent strategy. The interesting thing is, he still maintained his deliberate strategy, which was a strategy of growth. He wanted to make sure he stayed open. And remember orientation, we talked about mission, vision, and values. He has a big sign on his wall, and he said, that's our mission. And it's his mission, and it's, we serve people the best food. He says, that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're going to do through this crisis. And hey, we're going to keep going, and I'm going to continue to employ everybody I have. It's a marvelous testament to his managerial and leadership capability. And we're going to do it a different way while maintaining our orientation on our values. That's what strategizing allows you to do. But you can't strategize if you haven't stopped the bleeding. So if you've got somebody that's taking care of the now, you and your next group as the leaders can take care of the next. And that's where we're talking about strategizing. So as you're thinking about your situation, are we still taking care of the bleeding? Are we still trying to stabilize the situation? Or are we now thinking about the next and saying, what's changed in my daily operations? What do I need to do now to emerge into the new reality while maintaining or discarding our deliberate strategy? Many organizations had to discard their deliberate strategy that they might put together for a number of years, and now that's gone. So now you have to execute. And when we're executing, we're looking at that concurrent focus, and we're making that concurrent focus happen. The way we make that concurrent focus happen is by cadenced, aligned communications, and based on 4 key attributes. And the interesting thing is, remember the crisis piece? Your organization is in crisis, but your people are in crisis as well. Your 4 communications are all about moving your people through crisis. We're going to show compassion because their life has changed. Our organization has changed. And although our time has become compressed, we have to be more empathetic than ever before. We have to be authentic about what is happening. And we say what we know. We say what we don't know. We say what our ambitions are, and we show what our goal is. What we know, what we don't know, what our ambitions are, and what our goal is. What that does is move people through the Kubler-Ross grief stages and goes, okay, maybe we can get through this. Why? Because everyone's as being as clear as possible. You are frontline leaders. You are building the bullets that will defeat COVID. You are in an unprecedented challenge that we are going to meet together. And then you tie it up with resolve. And in that way, someone goes into the negative phase of the change curve, and you are actually pushing them towards the positive phase. That positive outcome of we're going to move through this, and we're going to move through this together. Providing that direction, alignment, and re-energizing the commitment that people have to move through the crisis. Okay. Now it's time to act. And we're going to ask some questions after this. And that is, when we execute our step 5, we balance leadership and management. We balance crisis leadership and crisis management. We balance the human side with the machine side. Human side is all about mindsets, behaviors, and culture. All that stuff that General Shinseki was talking about, the importance of culture in history. That's where we use compassion. We tell them what's ending. We empower every level, just as Admiral Ryan did when he went skip levels to put together the triage teams. We show a lot of caring, and we're challenging them to move through. As we started after our triage teams as a part of our emergent strategy, we organized over 160 associates around the world to help build online products. It was interesting, the response that we got to that, because people said, hey, we're busy. We're doing something. You're giving me something to do with my hands. Very powerful sense of caring. We want you to do something. We want you to continue to be productive. Then that resolve piece. What are you going to do and how you're going to do it? Keep researching, keep leading, keep learning, just like Michigan State University. But, you know, if we're only on the cheerleader side, if we're only on the leadership side, you know, there's a whole business side that Pierre has to run in his barbecue shop. So what Pierre started doing is he made some really quick decisions. And as South Carolina started shutting down, he reoriented his business. Now as South Carolina is opening up, he is reorienting his business very quickly. He's using his triage team to identify emergent strategies. He's reinforcing his mission and purpose. We serve people the best food. And if it wasn't the best, and when you call him up, he says that. He goes, He goes, I've got this and this. It's not the best today. Okay, but I got this and this, and it's the best, and that's what you want. And that's how he answers the phone. Very powerful reinforcement of goal and mission. Focus on service provision, especially for our friends on the call who are in government agencies. It's interesting for those of us who are on the call who are in business, we talk about reinforcing market capture, identifying what your new market is and going there, meeting that market before they know they're a market so that you can capture them. When we talk about government, it's all about service provision and mission execution. And then finally, constant and consistent information flow. So I've got some questions for you because I'm curious what you've seen. And we're going to go back into pollev.com/leading 2020. And I'd like to know, what are some good leadership behaviors you have seen during the crisis? And I want to be real clear about what a behavior is, because this is hard. A behavior is something you can see on a video, hear on an audio. Okay? Many times we'll take behaviors and we'll put them in perceptions. That person did not get angry. Okay, well, that's a perception. That person pounded their hand on the table and pointed at me. That's probably not the best behavior. So we've got some answers coming in. Openness, yeah. Engagement, yeah. Upfront and comfortable with not having an answer. Oh, yeah. That's that authenticity piece. Don't have an answer? I'll get you one when I can. Transparency. Initiation. We've got to get this going. Sense of urgency. We got to get it going now. Transparency. I don't know. Do you know? Do you have an answer? Let's get together and find it out together. Yeah, people first approach. You can't do your mission without them. And once they feel that, they're there. And you have to make decisions. Even with imperfect information, just like General Shinseki said, we've got to make the decision with the information that we have. Empathy, active communication. And active communication for some of us is this. Active communication for millennials, it's this, okay? It's this right here. It's getting on those social networks, letting people know what's going on. Follow up. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And availability, being available. This for me has been a real challenge with my team because we work globally. I have parts of my team in Shanghai, the US, Europe, and I want to make sure I'm available to them, but boy, those time zones kill you sometimes. So we want to be as available as you can. Yeah, honest and integrity. So we've got some great ideas of leadership behaviors. What I'm curious about are, what are some management actions that we might see during crisis? Those good management actions. What are some management? We've got some decisions, that's great. But what are some other management actions that we see during crisis? One that I've seen people put up here is one that many of us will resonate with, and that's good intel. Collecting good intel and understanding what's going on around you, understanding how things are working around you. Keeping people informed. Absolutely. This is how we're going forward in our business. This is what we're doing. My buddy Pierre with the barbecue restaurant has a Facebook. He updates twice a day. Says, this is what we got. This is what we serve. This is what's going on. Thank you. Whoever put okay with mistakes. Thank you very much. This is not the time except for safety. Safety is always number one. But yeah, you want to accept those mistakes because that's how we learn. Assuredness, have a post-crisis plan, update with facts, absolutely. All of these are excellent management actions and business actions. Recognizing the challenges of working from home and adapting. Have you seen the reports that said that productivity has actually gone up now that people are working from home? Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the reasons is a lot of people feel that if I'm not in a meeting doing productive, people will think I'm slacking off. That's one reason. And 3 cheers for all those people at home and some of you on this call that may have children at home and dogs and all the requirements of home as well, and still increasing productivity. Because that plays into the last 2 parts that I'll talk about, and that is recalibrating and pivoting. So when our takeaways from our acting, we want to focus and prioritize, understand and prioritize, re-examine our old assumptions because we're in an unprecedented challenge, and balance the human element and business imperative in our strategic communication. That balance piece is so important. 6 and 7 go really fast, especially for this group, because what do we do in number 6? We have an AAR. We have that after action review, and we find out, we codify our lessons learned, we reprioritize, and then for all those people who are making that productivity happen at home, we acknowledge that win. We have to be over communicative about people who are living the values and living that orientation. And I'd like to give you 3 key questions that we use at the Center for Creative Leadership to do a very quick AAR that will get you a very innovative response. And it's a little different from, you know, the 6-step AARs that we might be familiar with, but it really engages people in a way that you might find surprising. And it's just 3 questions. And as you're walking from that meeting, or you finish that Zoom meeting, or you finish that project, the first thing you ask is what you did right. What did we do right? Hey, we had a Zoom meeting. We had a first Zoom meeting in PPALM history. This is the best. That is amazing. Yes, sir. This is awesome. What did we do right? What surprised us? Okay, some people might drop off. What surprised us? We can do polls online. What surprised us? We had all these terrific people who are so engaged as we go through this. And then the last question is, what do we do different tomorrow? The interesting thing is we'll say, well, what did we do wrong? The interesting thing is what surprised us usually comes out that, well, we didn't know about this or we didn't know about that, but we did this. And this is what we're going to do different tomorrow. All right. And so as we look at those 3 questions, you are recalibrating to set the foundation for your pivot for success. And that's where you reinforce that organizational agility and resilience. And Colonel Cowell is going to talk more about mental awareness, being socially connected, emotionally positive, and physically fueled. For the organization, we're also talking about organizational agility, viewing crisis as an opportunity. A quote that's attributed to Winston Churchill, he says, never waste a good crisis. And he said it all the way through the Blitz. So view crisis as an opportunity. Get those lessons learned down. I know some people might laugh, but you know, the Army is a learning organization because they demand AARs. That's something that we're trying to build within businesses today. We want to understand operations, information, technology, and people plus their interaction. And through the crisis, emerge stronger than before. And that's why I was so happy to see in our first poll where people saw this crisis as an opportunity. And so we've walked through our 7 steps. And what we wanted to do, I hope you're walking away with an idea, different situational awareness. Where am I right now? What do I need to do? What can I do differently? And importance of primarily agility, organizational and individual agility. And we're going to talk more about individual resilience next. The ability to use these 7 steps. Where am I and what do I need to do next? And then creation of a new mindset, new thinking, using this framework as an idea to think about the complexity that we're in right now and how we might do this differently. So one last question for you. We'd like you to share one thing, just share one thing that you will do differently when leading a crisis in the future. It might be this one. It might be the next phase of the crisis. And I'm going to go ahead and go into pollev.com/leading2020. And we'll capture some of these lessons learned for the rest of PPALM so that they can learn from everybody who's on the call. And if you're having any challenges or anything with Poll Everywhere, please let us know. I'm going to bring up the chat. If you're more comfortable putting these into chat, that's fine too. Come on, sir. How did I know? Who put that on there, sir? That was awesome. Runaway screaming. Absolutely. Yeah, have accommodations prepared in advance. Oh, wow. That is so, I'm going to frame that one. That is so powerful. Is how do we, basically how do we leverage the ability of everybody on our team, especially those that have unique abilities like that? Request for some more feedback. Yeah, absolutely. And you can use the same terms I use. Hey, give me some feedback on behaviors you've seen or don't want to see, and actions that you've seen and don't want to see. Have plan B and C and D, those emergent strategies. And it's some of those things that we talk about as in some of our planning world, it's branches and sequels. Recognize the difference between emergent strategy and deliberate strategy. So powerful, okay? And we all know about those commanders who fight the plan and don't fight the enemy. This is one of those times we got to fight the enemy by being flexible. Know more about the team, more team building. Hard to do on Zoom, but there's a lot of different ways, and there's some really interesting ideas out there on YouTube as well as on the web about different ways that you can build teams. Thank you. Go for longer walks. I think Colonel Call is going to talk about that. Get info from everybody. All great ideas on the table. Perfect. Practice more self-awareness and mindfulness. Got time for a couple more coming in. And I think we've got 2 minutes left in mind for some questions. Do I have 2 minutes, Lita? Yeah? Okay. Order the home gym. These are great. Make sure everyone is heard. Boy, that is so powerful. Communicate clearly. Yeah. And it's interesting because some people don't want to talk up in groups. I mean, they have a personality preference that's a little scary for them. That's one of the times where if you know someone who knows them, or you can walk up to them after the big meeting, or just give them an independent call and say, hey, just want to make sure I heard from you. Just want, I didn't see you speak up, and I know you have some good ideas. And then to sit back with a Coke and just listen to some great ideas that they have. Have good Wi-Fi. Absolutely. So I'm going to pause there, provide time to think about, and then tally the ideas. Yeah. What we wanted to do was basically go over a framework to help you think through and not at crisis. We have a couple of minutes, and I'm going to bring up the chat again. And as you have questions, please put your questions into chat. There we go. Now I've got my chat up. Oh, man. General Harai, thank you very much, sir. If you haven't seen the chat, he mentions that in AARs, you asked, what do we do well? What are you most proud of? Boy, what a powerful question. Hey, sir, I think we're going to have 4 questions in this now instead of the 3. Because in that proud of, that also implies ownership.
I don't understand. Hey, Siri, I think we're going to have...
Love iPhones. It implies an ownership. So let me pause there. That's a lot of information. There's 2 PDFs that are in your packet. There's there's a link to our website. Incidentally, we're not trying to sell anything on the website. Everything on there is free because we're a 501c3 executive education institution, and we take that very seriously. So everything's free, including Gene Klon's book, and you can download the entire book if you want to look at that. It's a really good read, and it really helps you with some of the challenges that you might have. So let me go ahead and close because I want to hear more about resiliency. And as we close, just like to leave you with the idea that there's only one certainty. And that is, there's going to be another. And the question is, are you ready? Because it's coming. We haven't seen it. We don't know what it might be. But if we have how we are going to think about the crisis, if we understand how we are going to operate within crisis, the joke when I teach mentors is I say, if you walk in with the idea, the questions you want to ask and the information you want to have, hey, you've just solved 50% of the problem in that conversation. So if you know how you want to address crisis, yeah, you're addressing half the challenges you might face as you go through that crisis. So I want to thank everybody very much again. I'm privileged to be here, but I'm truly honored to be a part of this group. If I can be of any help, Lita has my email, and you've got the link to the Center for Creative Leadership. So thank you very much for your time and your attention today. Thank you. Sir?
Let's give Dr. Clemson Turagano a virtual applause. That was marvelous. I've learned a lot more than in my old age than I did when I was younger. Ready?
Okay, so sir, at this time, I would like to introduce my co-worker in the chairman's office, Dr. Chad Cowell. We'll wait to get this presentation going, but you can see his bio and presentation enclosed in the program. Doc Cowell currently is serving as the flight surgeon for the chairman, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, John Mark Milley. on one of our trips, I was having a lot of back pain from the flight. So Doc shared with me a couple of exercises and tips that helped me survive the rest of the trip. Today, we have the opportunity for him to share with you. Doc, over to you.
Is he muted?
Chad, Doc, can you hear me?
He's on mute. He's on mute.
Doc, can you, there you go.
Take two. All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, when Dr. Tarragano was talking about kids and family, my kids and dogs and everyone are now back in the house. So I apologize ahead of time if there's some noise in the background. So, and I was just saying, it's so good to see Con, my dear friend from the joint staff, and it's such an honor to be part of PPALM today. And I was saying when I was muted, I think this is the first seminar I've spoke at where I don't have my shoes on. So you're talking about resilience. I don't know how many of you are barefoot over there. Maybe with the Hawaii background would be mahalo. So yeah, it's really fortuitous that and great serendipity that Con and I met during what was for me several trips with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, going back to when I took over as Chairman Joe Dunford's position back several years ago. What I started to notice in my patient population that I was traveling with was significant occupational and conditions that I had treated as an ER physician start to show up within the population of individuals that were traveling. And so I would apologize ahead of time too. There was a lot of unexpected, like Dr. Tarragano was talking about, volatile, uncertain, and complex things that happened this week. And so I probably could have used his help developing my slides. I'm sorry, they're very basic. So they're basically built from a collection of things that I have implemented with the chairman and the team and the joint staff to help as practical ways that you can start to implement to build some resiliency in your lives. And in particular, in this existing times where we're dealing with COVID-19 and information is so difficult to ascertain of what is actually helpful for large populations and individual people who just, want to build their health and wellness overall. It seems like that's a catchphrase in the Department of Defense that we hear about more and more each year, is this wellness. And you get an email and from the command level that says, okay, we're going to build wellness, we're going to build resilience, but they don't really give you any ideas of what that actually means. To some people that means time off with family and friends, and to some people that means more access to fitness and time to walk. But I think if you'll go through the slides as the way I collected it through time, I think it might offer everybody some real quick practical solutions that they can implement. And I think it would be obviously great for Con to forward the email that I sent out along with all of the citations from where I get a lot of the literature to make sure you're doing things that are helpful and safe and could actually make a difference. So I am going to pull my screen up here so I can see the presentation. Let's see. So Lita, I can't see the presentation anymore. I just see my video. So I'm going to try to fix that technical difficulty here.
It should be, just share your screen.
Okay.
Okay.
So share screen and, okay. Well, that's probably not the screen you guys want to see. Well, you know what? Since I can't get it to I think review the things that I know that are on it. So I think, can everyone still hear me? We got thumbs up? Okay. Okay. So a little bit about the history again of this. I think it goes back to speaking to Dr. Pergano was talking about Winston Churchill, and one of the quotes that the chairman talked about a lot is when you're in hell, keep going. And I think finding ways to do that. I think on our last trip, interestingly enough, when Con was there, I had just spent the last year in an integrative medicine fellowship at the Center for Pain Management. And part of one of my professor's teachings there was not just palpation-based acupuncture, which I started at Harvard, was also Tai Chi. And so in between the classes, as we learned the fundamentals of the meridians that are the points along the body that actually help to treat things like back pain and headaches, we would actually stand up and engage in breathing and Tai Chi. And I had from multiple deployments a lot of back pain and knee problems that I noticed it started to improve. And so it basically started this evolution of a multitude of the Western medicine practices that I had learned along the way weren't not getting the job done just locally in my emergency medicine practices, deployed as a flight surgeon, and then treating my population at the NMCC, which is the National Military Command and Control Center, where people sit for long periods of time. They're isolated. I think anyone, I'm sure General Takuba spent some time in the Pentagon, knows that a lot of the rooms inside the Pentagon are devoid of windows. There's no UV light, there's no plants, everybody's stressed. I think whether you're at the Pentagon or whether you have your regular commercial jobs, those positions sometimes, or those conditions are recreated. And so it's, the irony is not lost to me that this discussion to individuals within PPALM are Indo-Pacific practices from the Eastern cultures and philosophies, which I've tried to adopt and integrate into my practice. And so, again, not seeing the slide deck, kind of going out of order here a little bit, probably, was the integration of daily breathing techniques during the day. And so one difficult way to implement those practices is if you email out to everybody and just say, oh, well, practice yoga, or read the entire book on Ayurvedic practices or Chandali breathing. And so I think it says in this, some of the slides, it talks about the relationship that I developed here with General Fenton, who's the senior military advisor to the Secretary of Defense, and General Dan Kane, was that, okay, find a quick solution to maybe be able to send across multiple platforms to get people to immediately build their immune system and reduce their stress. And so that investigation led me to the book, What Doesn't Kill Us, which was written by Scott Kearney. And it has the foreword, and a multitude of the discussion is about an individual named Wim Hof. So I'm not sure if some of you have heard of Wim Hof. I can't see everybody shaking their heads here, but basically he was someone that early in his marriage lost his wife to suicide. And he was trying to develop system of his practice of Ayurvedic medicine and Buddhist and Hindu breathing techniques, and was able to basically come up with something they call the Wim Hof method.
Can
And
you
in-
see the screen? I just shared the screen.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can maybe lead it. Can you maybe do it again here?
Yeah. Can you guys see the screen?
No, we're seeing his screen.
Okay,
Okay.
I
I'm going to see if I can.
So Chad, if you stop sharing your screen, and if
Okay.
Eric, and John, if you can stop sharing your screen, we can go back to what Lita has presented. Under view options, you do have the ability to pick the shared screen you want to look at on
yeah,
Zoom. So if Chad, if you stop sharing your screen, then we just go to the one that Lita has.
Okay, is Lita now sharing my screen, which would have been my very simple slide deck? Is that true?
yes.
Okay. And then I am going to see if I can see what Lita sees as well, which will allow me to see what you guys are seeing. So I am going to,
I have a series of icons on there with your files on my screen.
okay.
Yeah, sir, on the top where it says you are viewing whatever. If you go to the right there, it should say view options. If
Yeah.
you click on that, you'll see a pull down menu.
And take them off.
One of the pull down menus says shared screens, and there should be two names up there.
Right.
One PPALM Inc. and the other one is for
Right.
Chad.
You want the PPALM Inc.
You want the PPALM Inc. one.
Right. That's the one.
Correct.
Okay. I think part of my issue here is that I only have a very small group of faces wonderful faces that I see here, including Cons. And I see Lita in the top left-hand corner there, but I still don't see my slide deck. So maybe I can. I think hide video panel. I don't know why I have such a limited view here of the Zoom functions. I'm going to need more stress and resiliency building here, guys. I'm sorry.
Hey, Chad, if you go all the way up and you go past your desktop and you scroll with your mouse, a tab should pull up. You should see it says you are viewing your screen, and there's a tab that says view options. Do you see that?
Disable hide video panel. One of the problems is it basically is just such a small, it just went to this very basic.
Go all the way on top to the top.
Okay.
You see a green panel, a green banner. You said you are viewing PPALM Inc. screen. You see that?
Yeah, there you go.
I think
Go to the top of your screen.
maybe if I share my screen, you guys can see.
Okay.
Okay, there. If I hit stop share.
Right.
Okay, wait. I think I'm getting somewhere now, guys. Okay.
You see
Right.
that?
I see my knee squats there. Is there a way to get that to move up to?
You want top?
Yeah, we just start at the top and I'll run through. That might be take two
Okay.
for everybody.
Okay.
And I'll
there
see
you
if
go.
I can salvage your trust in me here, Con. Okay, go ahead and scroll down to the next one. Okay, so again, we'll go back to sleep. I think again, it would be very effective as this slide deck is a collection of things that I send out to everyone. because sleep has been quantified as so important to the inflammatory response that's associated with the response and the cytokine storm that we're seeing in COVID-19, even in my patients that I've treated in the urgent care center. There's an incredible body of evidence now to show that individuals that are sleep deprived have disruptions in their circadian patterns, and it's one of the reasons we think some people unusually have this terrible response to the coronavirus infection. And if you go down to the next slide, I think you can see there up to a quarter of the population. And in a recent publication that I published, actually, it was up to 40 to 50% of individuals on active duty military suffer from insomnia. And so this was a quick collection. One of the biggest things that people forget to do in a room that they have and struggle with sleep is that the room is too hot. Two ways to help facilitate the 2-degree drop in temperature to get the appropriate delta wave sleep that you need to have appropriate sleep is to take a warm bath before you go to bed. Another way is to make sure that you lower your room temperature. I sent this email out to General Dan Tully, who's the actual acting commander at Al Udeid Air Base, where I was deployed several times. And he said, "I'm sorry, Chad, but I can't make it cold in my room." So they still struggle with air conditioners deployed and things like that. So as you can imagine, these are ideal situations where if you find yourself in historically, I think, fighter pilots struggle with this, individual pilots themselves, people who move a lot between time zones have a tough time resetting their circadian rhythms. And so the inherent melatonin levels and other neurotransmitters get disrupted. So I think you can see in that list, and again, I know it's small because I didn't get to format it, but basically there are a variation of what's called happy lights that you can order. They start off at about $30. You can put them on your desk, and they emit an LED spectrum that helps to shut down the endogenous neurotransmitter melatonin. What's good about that is if there's melatonin still around during the day, it continues to make you drowsy. And not all the coffee in the world sometimes can help reset that circadian pattern. And so what we found with research that people that use these happy lights, and I've started in the wellness programs within the Pentagon to actually install them in the outer ring and in the NMCC so that people are making throughout exposure times, helping to improve their overall ability to get a better night's sleep. I also included, you better see from the slide deck, links to some of the small YouTube videos on how just breathing and what we call noting, which is basically what a lot of people struggle with, is thinking about trying to go to sleep, and they're tired and they want to go to sleep, but they're thinking about all of the day's worries. And noting is a function of cognitive behavioral therapy that we actually teach people how to do a stepwise process in their brain to fall asleep. And many of the reasons why I started fighting so hard to implement, the temperature change, LED happy lights, cognitive behavioral therapy, is because a large portion of the military were so overexposed to sleep aids, which are benzodiazepine sleep aids like Ambien. And those medications, unfortunately, are not safe for long-term use. They're used for operational counter-fatigue measures for short-term use. And so I have seen incredible success with this list of numbers that you see here on the slide deck. And if you follow the list on those numbers, I could tell you that you will see some improvement in your sleep behavior, and which overall in workplace resiliency especially is one of the biggest problems and challenges that we face. So Lita, if you could scroll down too, I'll just take a look at what else you have on there. Okay, go ahead and keep going. So those are some of the back pain exercises. Keep going, Leda. See where else we're out there. So at the COVID prevention regimen that I have been implemented, I think you guys have noticed if you go to your local CVS, you'll probably see that there's no zinc on the counters. I think at the Pentagon, I watched it for almost 3 months now. There is still no zinc. The only zinc that people have is the zinc that I ordered on Amazon and delivered and hand delivered to their office and the chairman's office and I spread it out in bottles. And much like sleep, I think, again, in this forum, it's beneficial because you can have a little longer conversation than the snippets that you see on Fox News or that you see on CNN about what can I actually do if I don't want to suffer what looks like can be an incredible cytokine response and inflammatory overload with coronavirus and COVID-19. And what I found over basically the last decade, looking at H1N1 influenza studies, the SARS and MERS-CoV, which were also coronaviruses, and I think everybody knows now, whether they want to or not, that is part of the cold virus family. It has similar vulnerabilities to other cold viruses. And it also seems to, in vitro, which we study outside of the body in the lab, have an incredible response to the things you see on that slide deck, which is zinc, is vitamin C, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. And I'll talk a little bit more about vitamin D later, and then resveratrol and quercetin. And I just put those 5 because they're safe and they're effective. There's not really an upper toxicity dose. You can certainly have a chat with your physician about the amount of zinc that you would take. It's the only one that could potentially upset your stomach if you took too much. But the long-term studies with zinc are incredibly safe. But what's fascinating about zinc, and I think unfortunately some of the data on zinc has been tarnished by some of the overbearing press conferences where I think everyone's heard the president talk about his utilization of hydroxychloroquine with zinc. And my good friend and colleague, the current White House physician, I think, looked at the data that I'm looking at, and you should make that individual decision with your patients on how high is their risk to having significant risks from dying from coronavirus. And that mechanism helps zinc fight the virus. And so zinc alone without the hydroxychloroquine has been shown to be effective against the virus in a laboratory setting. So I think that it's a fair discussion to have with everyone today in the PPALM conference, just as a side note of how I've delivered it out across my patients and the joint staff, and that I think it's a conversation to have with your families as well. Because we're now seeing, I think you've seen again on the news, that this population from 40 to 65 to 70 being at moderate risk and not severe risk are also being hospitalized, are having an unusual respiratory infection rate, and sometimes even succumbing to the virus. And so what we think is that the synergy of these supplementations can help, if you do get exposed to the virus, make sure that you don't have such a violent response to the virus. And I also put the baby aspirin, and probably would have this conversation on a more independent level. Baby aspirin's been used for thousands of years. Hippocrates noticed it on the Greek islands that chewing on willow bark reduced headaches and fever. It basically is isolated from willow bark. It is a compound that is used across a multitude of medical conditions. I think everybody knows it's used for preventing heart attacks, but there's an incredible new amount of data and evidence now that younger individuals have a clotting response. And there's been clusters of young people admitted to the hospital with stroke-like activity and blood clots. And so it's another thing I think you should really talk about with your physician if you're going to take a baby aspirin anyway, every day or every other day, that it might be a consideration if you find yourself traveling a lot or in high-risk populations that have been exposed to the virus. So we'll go over those in a little bit more detail too. So Lida, if you can go through the slide deck too. So again, most of what I have found in this collection came from my studies and research into David Asprey and David Sinclair. David Asprey, I think everybody's heard of the bulletproof diet. If you haven't, if you Google it, you'll see 1 billion hits in a $1 trillion industry. Dave Asprey and David Sinclair might be the first people to live to be 150 years old, because the research of the information that they are exploring is incredible and it's compelling. And so I think I titled this email, again, I know it's still kind of an email format, but this email is called, Doc Calls Life Hacks to Fight Entropy. And so fighting entropy is just what I've been trying to do with knees and backs and special operators and deployers. Like, how can I build a collection of things that are on the cutting edge to build resiliency in your day-to-day life? And so kind of goes back to the conversation before I got access to my slide deck about Wim Hof and David Kearney's book, What Doesn't Kill Us. All of these things seem to have a synergistic effect with linking the body to the autonomic nervous system and our ability to upregulate the immune system. And Wim Hof and Dave Asprey of David Sinclair's research out of Harvard is compelling in that it seems like we actually have the ability in a very simple and effective and relatively inexpensive way to upregulate our immune systems. And one of the most effective parts of the immune system is the killer T cell, which you can see there at the bottom, is a portion of our innate immunity that actually functions to kill the coronavirus in the lung tissue where it has a great affinity for. And so a lot of the nutraceuticals, are a broad category of compounds that help build cognitive and physical health. I think a lot of you have probably heard of turmeric. You've heard of turmeric with black pepper. Saffron's another one that I have on there, coenzyme Q10. And again, they're all on the list, but they all have individual effects to help strengthen the body against disease and also benefit the body for sleep and mental health. So Leda, if you could go through the slide deck again. And so it's interesting that a lot of these things came together on my recurrent trips to the Pacific. And between going to the Shangri-La dialogues with Secretary Mattis and going to Hawaii several times with Chairman Dunford, and then this most recent visit, I had the great honor to accompany Chairman Milley on a trip to visit his friend Makuna Rothman, who's now, become a friend of mine. And he is a big wave rider in Hawaii. In fact, rode the largest wave in history. And he's an incredible spiritual, rounded individual that has, grew up in abject poverty watching surfers on the beach on the North Shore, and is now a millionaire surfer, has pretty much every sponsor in the world. And when I was standing on the beach and he was taking pictures with the chairman, I was telling him about my research with patients and with PTSD at the NICO Center and the Navy Intrepid Center of Excellence for PTSD here in DC. And he said, "Oh yeah, I know Wim Hof. He comes out here and trains all the surfers." And I almost passed out because I think if you watch the Goop documentary that Gwyneth Paltrow did, that is the link here that you can see, and the YouTube video that he did, you'll see his draw. And so what Makuna Rothman shared was that when the big wave riders are about to die and they're underwater and they're getting rolled and they're bleeding because they're hitting the reef so hard and they're knocked out, that Wim Hof's technique to build resilience in patients with his breathing and cold water exposure techniques basically helped them gain some type of footing and some type of overall sense of well-being in terribly stressful situations. And I think that, again, is what the impetus with Khan and I had the discussion when we were going through some of these techniques when we were in Japan together. And so I think that all of you would really enjoy watching those two, the interview with Joe Rogan and the documentary on Goop, and see how you could implement it across the platforms where you work individually and with your people in your different industries. So, okay, if you want to go through, Leda, click through a little bit. The Headspace, you can go back to it later, but basically it works really great in conjunction with the YouTube video with circadian rhythms and sleep. So Lita, if you could just click through a little bit, I'll see what else. I think because there's a lot here and it's been kind of a long day, I'll go through these a little quicker, but James Wilkes, and back into conjunction with the earlier discussion with Davis Frey and David Sinclair on capturing wellness in the body. The Game Changers documentary basically is how to implement a plant-based keto diet. And I know, again, when you talk about catchphrases, I must have 100 people a day text me and say, Doc, how do I intermittent fast? And even have this conversation with General David Goldfein, because he's always trying to think of ways to life hack the body. And they wanted to try to implement keto diets and intermittent fasting. And so if you watch the Game Changers movie, it's just a very short way to do those things. And he was an incredible MMA fighter, and he joined up with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so this documentary basically teaches you how to be keto plant-based. You can lose a lot of weight. It's good for cognitive health, and turns out seems to fight cancer on top of everything else. So I think you guys would enjoy reviewing that and implementing some of those things, and can be very effective in developing a plan like that. So, all right, if you want to keep going through. So the top 15, in addition to the David Sinclair and Davis Frey and the bulletproof diet and the Wim Hof breathing techniques, these are 10 or so active nutraceuticals that help to seem to help in pretty significant studies. As you can see, each one I have a citation that I've used in my own research. Here at Georgetown for the Center of Complementary and Alternative Medicine, where I occasionally go and collaborate. And the citations are good because it helps say, if you want to do 5 of these things, if you want to reduce your cortisol levels and improve your cognitive health, think a little clearer, maybe reduce your chance of heart disease, stabilize your testosterone levels. I kind of put these together as a way of, can you go, click, order them on Amazon, get them to come and take them safely in conjunction with the discussion with your doctor. I take all the things on here regularly. Full disclosure, I wish I was, but I'm not getting any payments from any of these companies. So they're just the kind of top cutting edge nutraceuticals that we have explored to help with resilience. So ashwagandha is basically a form of Asian ginseng. It's been used for millennia. I took it individually for a long time, basically when I had a lot of stress at work and I was fatigued. And again, the placebo-controlled trials are key, but it has synergy with some of the other ones that'll come up. And Lita, if you scroll through, I'll go through those. And I think it talks a little bit about why each one is good. Holy basil, similar, cognitive health and sleep hygiene. I think if you scroll down, there's a little list that continues. Saffron, every time I go to Afghanistan, which is dozens and dozens of times, traveling with the chairman, I always pick up saffron. It's pretty easy to order. It is expensive. And there's a couple of trials. What we think is it stabilizes the neurodegenerative process. The phyto compounds within that make the saffron red. And interestingly, saffron grows in very harsh environments, both in near the Bosphorus in Asia and Afghanistan. And the plant itself uses the compounds to survive. And so people have used it in tea and food. I use it for people that have issues that want to come off their ADHD medication, which I'm sure you've all heard of, Ritalin and medications for kids for ADHD. And now in this study that I've cited, they've actually showed it to be as effective as stimulants for ADHD in children. And so, hey, if it works for children, I know it works for my fighter pilots. So I have them all putting a pinch of it in their water if they're having difficulty concentrating during the day. And we use it at the Joint Staff, and I use it every day. And I've seen it work both anecdotally and in this study. I think you'll find some interesting information to help continue with the overall effects of resilience with nutraceuticals. So if you want to go through, lead a little bit further. This is the one that made David Sinclair a billionaire. once he isolated resveratrol from the red wine and from grapes. You probably have heard of resveratrol. If you want to just get it through half a glass of red wine a day, I think that's fine. I think we won't have time to go into the article that I published on Dave Buettner's research at Yale in the blue zone, but basically it's the 5 places in the world where you're likely to live to be 100 by a logarithm higher. One of those is Okinawa. The resveratrol is concentrated, and you can get it in supplement form, and is one of the most potent nutraceuticals. It seems to stop the aging process, which I think I'd love to have, and get a little less gray and a little more hair back. Whatever I can get here, I think we're all working for that. But the resveratrol is pretty easy to order these days, and I think if you want to take it with a sip of red wine every night, that's bonus as well. But I do think getting a regular dose of it, and what's really incredible about resveratrol is that there are some pretty potent mechanisms in its fight against inflammatory disorders, and particularly in respiratory viruses. And so this data already existed against SARS and MERS, and there was some pretty compelling evidence against H1N1 influenza, which are all of these respiratory viruses. But basically, if you squirt it on these cells in vitro, it kills the virus. And so that was good enough for me. And people were already taking it to help with longevity, and the fact that it works in conjunction with the other ones that I have here on the list. And I would have to say anecdotally too, that of the hundreds of people, including family members, that I have on these combinations, I just haven't had anyone that's gotten sick, including myself and my own family. So I think that it is worth investigating, and because of its safety spectrum, again, I think it's definitely something worth looking into. If you want to go through the next one, Lita. So another easy one, it's been around forever, quercetin. It's isolated in green apples. The beauty of Amazon allows you to look at the research and purification of these types of supplements, which, as you guys know, probably are not heavily FDA regulated. But again, the beauty of being able to click on it and read the reviews and actually see the purification data on quercetin, and incredible data. The link I have alone also shows some of its anti-aging and anti-cancer effects. And I think all of us have lost family members to cancer. When I really started putting this list together, before I realized how effective it was against respiratory viruses and its nature and ability to build resiliency, most of these studies came in different mechanisms as a complementary and alternative adjunct to existing Western medicine in treating cancer. And that has been my Horatio at the bridge here at Georgetown, and at the Joint Staff, and what all of my future in medicine will be. It will be looking at ways that these compounds can work to help stop the inflammatory process that leads to cancer. So if nothing else out of these alone, I do think that taking some combination of these can help prevent the likelihood of developing colorectal cancers and lung cancers. The data on baby aspirin alone, I think that's always been the hesitancy. If you look back at the willow bark isolation of baby aspirin and its ability to lower inflammation, it's a plant alkaloid, really was its ability to fight cancer. And another massive study was just researched that if you take a baby aspirin 81 milligrams a day and even every other day, you can reduce your risk of colorectal cancer by 30%. If I had a drug that could reduce your risk of one of the leading causes of cancer that will likely affect us or our family by 30%, and my only concern was a small likelihood of an incredibly small likelihood of gastrointestinal bleeds, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that is a conversation you want to have with your physician. Like, what is your higher likelihood of risk? And so in conjunction with resveratrol and quercetin and some of these other autonomic nervous system building techniques, I think you can significantly reduce your risk of cancer. I really believe that. Okay, Leah, if you want to scroll through a little bit further. Okay, I think that was on here. Go up to the next slide with the fiber. because I have so many patients that suffer from colorectal cancer, and hemorrhoids are, something that are a higher risk for fighter pilots. They're higher risk for people who sit at desks for long periods of time, and all these colorectal diseases come from the Western diet. People, before the Western diet got introduced to the East, they didn't have these types of colorectal problems. And so, I get one a week probably of a patient that's suffering from one of these, basically diet and work-based conditions. And so if you're not doing it already, do not let the sun set unless you've had 20 to 30 grams of fiber. And if you have to get an inulin fiber supplement, a gummy to do it, do it. And in conjunction with that, you need the water during the day to make sure that the transit time is appropriate. But this is if the single take-home message of all of this today. Make sure you're getting enough fiber in your diet, because I know that a majority of people when you get busy and you're just not doing it. Most people aren't even aware how much they're supposed to get, because the FDA, doesn't publish the data probably as well as they should. So anyways, when Ali and I, my first assignment was as an ER doc in Korea, and I was in Osan, I actually lived on Xinjiang Ildong, just north of Seoul. And it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. But what I could see in the younger Korean population had just one generation away with the 5 big restaurants on that street, which were Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's. For decades, they were having all of these beautiful foods like kimchi and bulgogi cooked in garlic and all of these oils and cabbage. I mean, the kids that were the younger generation weren't folding up their kimchi and eating cabbage. We were experiencing it. And as I came to learn later, not only is the fiber content so important, but the cancer fighting and inflammatory fighting compounds within the red pepper and the garlic and the cabbage are astronomical. And so I think we're starting to adopt those things and see those now, in especially in the DoD, at the importance of diet. So Leda, if you want to scroll down, I think we're getting close to the bottom here. Glucosamine quickly. I know knee and back pain haunt us all. In that article I had attached is, how to live longer and run farther. It's a combination of the Galloway running method, which the Chairman Dunford loved. When we would run together, we would basically run for 3 minutes and walk for 1. So the theory is that you walk before you start to hurt. Lots of people have adopted the Galloway method. But supplementing with glucosamine and chondroitin sulfate, however you get it, if you want to order it, has some really compelling evidence that it can slow chronic knee and back pain. And so I've been taking it for a long time. I continue to be able to, try to keep up with my kids. And so I think that it's something for you to look into. Okay, Lita, if you want to scroll down. So CoQ10, I won't spend much time on. It's another antioxidant you want to talk about with your physician first. It does seem to increase nitric oxide in the red blood cells. Anything that is resiliency building offers oxidative protection. The active entropy itself, just with time, is just the inflammatory process causes degenerative changes in the back and the knees and the joints and the elbows and the heart. CoQ10 seems to have an impact on slowing that oxidative damage. And just another one for you to think about. Next one, Lita. I think it's a little bit of no mystery. Chai teas everywhere now. You can find it at Starbucks. The secret in chai tea and other teas, the plant alkaloids are very powerful, similar to the methylxanthines in coffee. We know from research that people who drink 2 to 4 cups of coffee, 2 to 4 cups of tea, even chai tea has compounds that are called methylxanthines, like L-theanine. Those compounds seem to have long-term protective effects against cognitive decline, particularly in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Preserving the memory is the single most important thing that we can do. I think there's some things later in my slide that are a little more philosophical about memory and how important it is to our collective heritage and to as an individual. And so we just know from research that individuals who use these compounds seem to have some long-term longevity improvement and some protection against cognitive decline. So I would encourage you to look into that. And again, I know it's kind of thrown together, but when people say, well, why can't I just take a Vibrant or take caffeine? Well, caffeine itself is not what's giving you necessarily the benefit. It's all the compounds that come along with chai tea and all the phytoalkaloids that help protect the neurons in the brain. So Leda, if you could go through for me. I think everybody knows enough about turmeric and curcumin and black pepper. You know, I was talking to a colleague earlier about Simon Winchester's book Krakatoa, which was about the largest tsunami and volcano in the late 19th century. And during that time, black pepper and turmeric, most of the book is about the trade of curcumin and black pepper. And the pirates on the high seas would cut your throat for a bag of. Now we can just order it on Amazon. So the reason, not only did it flavor foods and was exotic, but it has incredible applications for resiliency and cancer fighting. So Leda, if you want to scroll through, I think going back to the Kavita, the kombucha, kimchi, can't get enough of it. Probiotics are another reason we think that people are particularly susceptible to COVID. Overuse of antibiotics has killed all of our good bacteria. Having a normal constitution and a flora are going to be more important than ever as we Purell the hell out of our hands all day long, and our kids are social distancing and we're wearing masks. We really think as physicians that we're lowering our constitution by doing this. And so when we all go back out into society, we're going to need to have, you know, our own normal good bacteria. And these are several ways to do it. Any one of them, just consider it. Next slide. Again, I think everybody on the PPALM here knows just these are suggestions. I think most of them you could safely institute, especially some of the supplements like quercetin and resveratrol, but baby aspirin and some of the other ones you definitely want to, and CoQ10, you want to talk to your doc about. Next slide. So go ahead and scroll through the next couple of slides. I think a lot of you have probably seen the benefit of yoga and stretching. I'll let the slides speak for themselves. They go into great detail, particularly how to do, you know, some of the earliest Sanskrit, Ayurvedic, even that one basic yoga stretch can help your back so much. If we all just stood up and did it right now, we're running late, but we won't do it. But concentrating on your breathing, if you keep going through, just during the day, I'm always reminding people the simple act of elevating your scapula and breathing in and lowering your diaphragm. If you could just do it through the day, because everyone tells me they just don't have time to do these things for their back. But if you just do the McKenzie stretches that I have on here, 1 or 2 of them for a few minutes every day, I promise you that your back pain will get better. I promise you. I've watched it. It's amazing. And the reason is it works the hip flexors and the core. If you just want to keep scrolling through, Leda, I'll see if I can get to an ending. This goes a little bit more into the Galloway method. And this goes into the Blue Zone diet. But if you just want to stop there, Leda, I think we'll end it because I think we've gone way over our hour here. I didn't get to take any questions from you guys, but I think that I've delivered a lot of the core of the message that I wanted you to be able to have for yourselves and then for your teams. And I think what could be effective is that Con could certainly forward it out, and you're welcome to explore any one of the ideas or email me directly if you have any specific questions about it. But in that greater conversation with Con, my desire was to get it farther out to more people, because it just takes time to trickle out and get these concepts. And, you know, most of what I learned and taught for decades from my medical school were not these things. And I think my patients suffered for it. So I hope it's helpful to you guys.
Okay, well, Chad, thank you so much for your time. I just a note to the group. Chad just recently returned from a funeral, the passing of your dad. So we're thinking of you and your family. So thank you for sharing your time with us today. So it's a difficult task to follow such a distinguished group of speakers, especially when they have provided so many great messages and thoughts for us to take back to our homes, our families, and our work. To John Shinseki, sir, thank you again for your opening remarks. You are an inspiration to us all. Additionally, we have heard a great many things this afternoon that support our theme of wellness. While staying safe from COVID-19 is a necessity, obvious to us all, there are many other aspects of maintaining our personal and collective wellness that are just as important for a leader. For instance, being able to identify the stages and steps in times of crisis in Dr. Torigano's presentation, and the various techniques and methods to take care of yourself in Doc Cal's are so pertinent during this new norm. On top of it all is the need to stay connected, even as we are forced to remain apart during these times. Gatherings like these are important. They are opportunities for learning, for growth, for inspiration, and for mentorship. As a reminder, Juan will be emailing every registered guest an evaluation form. Please take time to fill it out as it serves as feedback for us to improve. Thank you all for attending today. Have a wonderful Memorial Weekend, and this concludes our program.
Can I say
Yes,
a
sir.
couple words? Yeah. Hey, before we close, Dr. Carl, I really would like for you to consult with me on anti-aging and staying healthy. You know, because aging is progressive, right? It doesn't come back; it never stops. So, and maybe it'll help me with my CRS. I can't remember stuff half the time, so it'll all be helpful to us. But listen, I know we've gone over the time, but I want to thank our presenters, to include General Shinzeki, for allowing us to hear their perspective. They're, I would call solutions to, they're not perfect, but they're good solutions for us to consider, especially when we are involved in crisis. And to Dr. Clemson Torigano, Dr. Carl, for their presentations. I think for the most part, we've enjoyed their presentation. So give me a thumbs up if you did. And I think we'll do more of this in the bright future. But again, I want to thank each and every one of you, to our guests all over the country, all over the world, and also to my PPALM board, Lita, Colonel Dip, John Abella, and James Prospero, and Juan Rodriguez. And if I left you, I'm sorry. We'll catch up with you. So if we could get your comments later about if this was productive and also useful for you to have this type of a forum, please let us know. We know that we had some technical difficulties and we expected that. But at the same time, I really enjoyed it. You know, I stayed awake. I saw some of you close your eyes, even though you were not on screen. I'm just kidding, of course. But again, stay healthy, please. Be safe with your family. Enjoy your long weekend, and we'll see you in the next seminar. All right. Thanks again. Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks, sir. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.